Hey guys, I want to talk about the image quality between the A9 and the Fujifilm xt2. Mostly because I own both cameras and they're both really good cameras. I could see how somebody might own both. So basically, I'm going to go with I'm going to talk about the sharpness, the high ISO performance, the dynamic range, and the colors. So first, let's start with the colors. The straight out of camera colors look generally better on the Fujifilm, and I think they're easier to process, especially in good light. But that's kind of the case with both. Neither of them are fantastic in low light for colors, and I don't know if that's just a camera thing or if it's just these two camera companies. But I noticed that both or the Fujifilm definitely goes towards a yellow like tone, kind of dark yellow tone with skin tones when it's dark out and people are in shade, or it's a dance or something like that. It's low light weddings, that type of thing. But I think it's just easier to work with colors on this, in my opinion. Pretty much I just put it on Astia, honestly, for the most part, and I love the colors from the Astia film simulation. However, this A9 beats it definitely with just your regular landscape pictures, and like if you want to just take nature photos, things like that. I think the Sony beats it for that. However, since I do portrait work a lot, it has been amazing to have the film simulations on this with the Astia film simulation that I really like. So overall, I'd have to give the nod to the Fujifilm, but the problem is there's no real way to make it like a standard profile like you can do with the Sony. I mean, they have a standard camera setting, but it's still a film simulation, and I don't think it's that great personally. With my testing, and by testing I mean usage over time, I just don't think it's that great. So generally, if I'm taking nature pictures or things like that, I'll just keep it in RAW. And sometimes I'll use the Velvia because if it's a sunset or something like that, it still does enhance it. However, weirdly, in my opinion, I think that it has I don't know, it just seems like it has less like tonal range as far as color gradations. Like it just seems like when I use it for landscape, it almost seems like everything's kind of one color. I don't really know how to explain that. It just seems like there's more colors going on in the Sony system. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. But it kind of seems like that. So overall, though, I'd still give it to the Fujifilm because the portrait color is amazing. It's kind of unfortunate because I still do like the colors I can get out of the Sony. It just takes a little more work to process them for people. And that's really the only thing, is it takes a little bit longer to process them for people. So that's the differences between colors, in my opinion. Also, next up is sharpness. And I know this doesn't have an anti-aliasing filter. However, after shooting the wedding, I can't tell pretty much any difference in the actual sharpness of the pictures, because that lens that I use on the Sony is so sharp that it's stupid, and the lens I had on this is super sharp too. But one thing you'll find, and it has to do with kind of like high ISO, I feel like, is you'll find more grain on the Fujifilm. At ISO 200 even, sometimes you'll still get grain, whereas the Sony at ISO 100 you pretty much never see grain. So in that case, I actually kind of like the Sony more. But it's hard to say. It's kind of a toss-up, since you can't use lenses on the other one, basically. It's hard to tell what's actually sharper. In theory, the xt2 should be sharper because of the lack of anti-aliasing filter, but Sony's been known to have pretty good sharpening and things like that that really show off the strength of the lens. So I've had no issue with that, nor did I expect any issue with that. So sharpness would be kind of a toss-up in my opinion. Just because the lenses are so stupidly good for this. If you get the premium G Master lenses, it's ridiculous. And then we'll talk about the high ISO. It's really no comparison. The A9 wins by a lot. And it's like a landslide. You can tell that the A9 is just, it's a full frame, it's far superior. It's a big reason why I bought the camera, honestly. I wanted an incredible high ISO camera. I've never had an incredibly good high ISO camera before. I had the Sony A99. That thing was terrible. If you want to know why I switched to the xt1 right here, is because my A99 was so disappointing in low light. The dynamic range and everything else was really good on that camera, but I was super unimpressed with the high ISO performance, especially in RAW. The JPEG files were beautiful, up to about 3200 maybe. 1600 was alright. 1600 was the highest I'd go if I shot RAW on that camera. I just didn't like the files that I was getting from that, and that's why I switched from Sony, because at the time they weren't as good in high ISO like they are now. Like now they kill it. They're the best in the business. Sony sensors are incredible, and this is no exception, and that's why I had bought into this again, is because of that. So let's talk about these two though. I would say the xt2 is decent for its class. Now, one thing that needs to be noted about Fujifilm is, and I'm sure most of you probably know if you've watched any kind of YouTube videos on this, but is that Fujifilm cheats the ISO by a good full stop. And I've tested that theory, and it is true, unfortunately. And I say unfortunately because it's disappointing that I have to change my shutter speed or bump up my ISO to compare to what I could do with this, a full stop difference. And that is disappointing, and it's kind of misleading. Now, I've seen the angry photographer, Ken Wheeler. I've seen him show the Fujifilm sensor, and it was like 7 layers of glass, I think he said. Now, he didn't seem to think that it affects that, but to me, I don't see how it wouldn't affect that, the light transmission in that. I really don't. So maybe that's why. If not, they just plain cheat it. And honestly, I'm not sure why they have 7 things of glass on their sensor. To me, that doesn't make much sense. Maybe you guys know. Maybe you can tell me. But that was kind of disappointing. I really have to admit, when I found that out, I was kind of disappointed. That being said, for most purposes, this is pretty good. I would say if you're shooting like wildlife and you're shooting birds and things like that, and you're going to be cropping in a lot, you are going to notice some fine grain at about ISO 800 and definitely at 1600. So keep that in mind. Whereas with the A9, you're going to see a lot less noise, and it's going to be a lot smaller grain too. So, the xt2, I'd say it's not bad for APS-C. It's just not exceptional. It's definitely not class leading, but it's towards the top still for APS-C. From what I've seen with other cameras, it is still up there. The D500, I think, is better, but slightly less megapixels. And I think that's kind of geared towards high ISO a little bit. Dynamic range, let's talk about that. Honestly, my testing, I would say the overall latitude of until you start to see color noise, the xt2 wins. That being said, for real world usage in the wedding that I did, I had a couple of problems. One, the flash was too hot on one of the pictures, and I was able to recover everything. And then one of them, the flash didn't go, and it was underexposed, and I was able to recover everything I needed to on that without any problems. So realistically, in real world use, I don't think you're going to have a problem with A9. I really don't. I wouldn't highly recommend it for landscape. If you want to do that stuff, the A7R2 is going to be a much better choice, or something like Nikon D750 that just has absolutely great great dynamic range. Actually, the Pentax K1 probably has the best dynamic range of any of them, even over the D810 from what I've seen. And I am quoting, and not quoting, but from what I have seen from DP Review and their dynamic range tests, the Pentax K1 has the ability to beat pretty much any camera out there for a landscape, as far as dynamic range. However, let's get back to these two. Realistically, though, there's kind of a problem though when you bring up the exposure on the xt2, and that is that the grain is much larger. You're going to get a lot bigger grain, and it's more noticeable than if you bring up the exposure on the A9. And I don't know, I know the sensor size difference may have something to do with that, but it's just something I've known. So if you're exposing it and upping the exposure, the A9 still might be better, because it's less grainy when you actually up the exposure. The grain is less. And at higher ISO, this definitely wins in dynamic range, but at very base ISO, I would say this outperforms it just slightly. And I do mean slightly, but this is perfectly good for real world use. I have yet to see anything where I've underexposed that I can't really use for my xt2 right here. It's just really good. The sensors that Sony makes are incredible for dynamic range. This is probably a little bit lesser, even compared to my A99, but the A99 was so bad at high ISO that I'm willing to trade off a tiny bit of dynamic range at base ISO for way better low light performance. So that's my opinion on that. Like I said, it's kind of depends on what you're using it for. And I will try to make a video, guys. I promise that I'll try to make one where I show a dynamic range test that's really kind of shows like bringing back highlights and upping shadows for both of these cameras. But realistically, for everyday use, these cameras have plenty of dynamic range for what you would need them for, like weddings, portraits. Because with portraits, mostly what I'm doing, if I'm bringing up shadows, I'm bringing up the shadows so it brings back the color in the background. Because I use a lot of light, and if the background's a little darker than I want it to be, I'll just up the shadows a little bit, and it's perfectly fine for that. But I will warn, don't ever shoot these in JPEG and expect to recover any information from these. They are not going to do it very well at all. I've only shot extra fine JPEG with this one, but it was atrocious at trying to bring anything back, so don't try it. RAW files are the way to go if you're shooting with this camera. However, you can still shoot JPEG with these. They're EVF, so you can still, meter them correctly and get a good exposure overall. So, but that's just kind of I wanted to talk about today, guys. Also, I have a T5 here that's actually my girlfriend's. I have my xt1 here. I thought I'd bring that out. It's the graphite edition. Got my xt2, my A9, and I used these three cameras for the wedding I shot. T5 is just not good enough. But if you want to know anything about these cameras, or let me know what you guys want to see, because I just enjoy what I do. I'm pretty busy this week with real estate photography. I've actually rented a couple of lenses that I'm taking to Chicago. I'm hoping to get some great shots there for my A9. But those are coming in, and I'm going to be testing them for real estate as well. So just let me know, guys, what you think. Let me know what you guys are experiencing if you own these two cameras, what you think of the image quality. I think overall the APS-C is just fantastic on this overall. It's one flaw is kind of the low light. It's not fantastic, but it's definitely good enough to do weddings. Just don't expect miracles. The A9 is perfect for weddings, and the dynamic range is plenty good for weddings. I wouldn't shoot either of these if I was just a landscape photographer. I'll say that. But not to say they can't. If you want a really good landscape shot, you can still get some good pictures. It's just not going to be the best of the best. But if you want really good image quality, solid all-around image quality, both these cameras are quite good and actually stellar, really, for the respective sensor sizes. So, thanks, guys. Let me know what you think of the video, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Have a good one.